of our nation. We place the flag on the ground. I stand today as we and the thousands of ancestors amidst our brothers and sisters celebrate Juneteenth, a 155-year-old holiday of official freedom, because July 4, 1776, we were not at all free. On June 19, 1865, the remaining 200,000 slaves held in the Confederate state of Texas were freed in accordance with the Emancipation Proclamation from the Executive Order of the United States. All slaves are now free. We celebrate the 13th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution to abolish slavery, the Civil Rights Act of 1866 that granted citizenship and the same rights enjoyed by white citizens to all male persons in the U.S. without distinction of race or color or previous condition of slavery or involuntary servitude. The 14th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, which extends liberties and rights granted by the Bill of Rights to former slaves. The 15th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, voting rights, granting African American men the right to vote by simultaneously implementing the first Jim Crow segregation law.
Right now.
The 19th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, which guarantees all American women the right to vote. Equal Pay Act of 1963, prohibiting sex-based pay differentials on jobs. The Civil Rights Act of 1964, prohibiting discrimination in public places, provided for the integration of schools and other public facilities, and made employment discrimination illegal. Voting Rights Act of 1965 outlined the discriminatory voting practices adopted in many southern states after the Civil War. Civil Rights Act of 1991 adding provisions to Title VII protections, including the right to a jury trial. These were many of the accomplishments that resulted from the blood, the sweat, and lives lost at the doors of our nation. However, I ask you, sisters and brothers, what is freedom? The dictionary defines freedom as the power or right to act, speak, or think as one without hindrance or restraint. 2, the absence of subjugation to foreign domination or despotic government. 3, the state of not being imprisoned or enslaved. While we seemingly gained many wins, the new Jim Crow era was born. Millions of African Americans locked behind bars, denied the rights we supposedly won. The majority of men in major urban areas are still under correctional control, warehoused in prisons, denied basic civil and human rights, perpetuating discrimination in employment, discrimination in housing, discrimination in access to public events, labeled felon for minor drug crimes. Slavery was redesigned through the war on drugs, 3-strike laws, and mandatory sentencing. These suffering came at the expense of us all, and the invisible punishment that often goes unnoticed, rooted in the prison industrial complex and profit-seeking slave masters of this era, where the killing of Black people has become the norm. We cannot stop here. We must continue to place the blood of the lives lost on the hands of our nation until freedom truly reigns. I encourage you today, as we celebrate, to continue crying loud and sparing not the system of racial injustice that exists in this world. Exercise your right to vote and be counted. How many of you understand what being counted means?
Let them know.
The Census Bureau is asking for your data. Why is your data important? It drives and dictates the budget appropriation for the seats in Congress, the seats at state and legislative House of Representatives. It drives Medicaid for people who need it. It drives Medicare for our parents. I joined that. 7 years from now, I will be 63.
Praise God.
Medicare all my life. If it so be, I deserve it. It drives women, infants, and children support to alleviate things like premature births or low birth weight. It drives our ability to vote. It drives our lunch systems where children, sometimes that's the only meal they get for breakfast and for lunch. It drives the food insecurities that we feel when we can't get the adequate food that we need to eat. Slavery still exists, folks. It's just redesigned. So I ask you today, take a few minutes, all of 10. They don't care what your name is. They care about who lives here. And if we're not a part of the population, then the budget we deserve, we don't get it. 68.1, don't quote me, $1 million
Billion.
that we don't get. And it's important that we save our nation. It's important that we get what we deserve. And I ask to stand in solidarity in this moment for reparations. I stand for reparations. I stand for reparations.
All right now.
For my people. We've been wrongly harmed. It's our job to reduce the harm and increase the protection. I stand in solidarity for reparations. Continue to cry. We place the blood on the doors
Of our nation.
of our nation. We place the blood on the doors of our nation.
All right.